Hello and welcome to the SOFEA Sessions podcast, the place where sharing lived experience enables people to transform their lives. In today's episode, we welcome our Deputy CEO and Director of the Business Innovation team, Noel McCarthy. In this episode, Noel reflects on how he came to be at SOFEA, the last 4 years as Site Director at our Milton Keynes site, and how that led to him heading up the new Business Innovation Directorate at SOFEA. Noel also talks about why this team has come about and why now in regard to the changes and current landscape of our community. He also has an important message to listeners, partners or corporates who want to get involved with what we do at SOFEA. If anything you hear in today's episode resonates with you, connects with you, or you're interested in investing in our development, please do get in touch. Hi Noel.
Hi Nikki.
Welcome to the SOFEA Sessions podcast.
Nice to be here.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, very well. It's a sunny day in Oxford, so yeah, we're looking good.
Good, you've brought the nice weather.
Yeah, from Tottenham.
Amazing. It's a long drive.
That's right.
Oh, well, thanks for being here. Can we start by just talking a little bit about who you are and what your role is at SOFEA?
Of course. I'm Noel McCarthy, previously the site director of the Milton Keynes site, South Midlands for SOFEA. And 3 months ago, I moved to Director of Business Innovation and also Deputy CEO, so that's deputising for Richard. So my role is now quite broad, incorporates running a new team, which we'll get into in a bit, but also sort of helping with the main functions of the charity. And Richard, who's managed the charity solely at a governance level, etc., for quite a long time now, has the support of a senior team and myself. So yeah, that's my current role.
Amazing. All sounds very busy in a developing organisation.
Slightly, yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a really critical time for the charity, I think. I mean we'll get into it a bit, but when I first started sort of interacting with SOFEA, it was a small youth project on the outskirts of Oxford, and it's not really what it is anymore. So,
no, not at all. It's like grown threefold, hasn't it, since we started?
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be interesting for me to talk a bit about how I first found SOFEA or my background, but so yeah, in 2018 I had a friend that I used to work with in London for a charity for blind children, Kimberly, who's now runs the employability programmes on our site in Didcot. She moved to Oxford. I'd been travelling for a couple of years, and she said when I'd got back and I was sort of looking around at work, she said, you've got to come up to Oxford, meet this guy called Richard and come and see what him and his team are doing in this warehouse in Didcot. I'd never been to Didcot. I knew it was on the railway somewhere. So that was in the summer of 2018, and it wasn't until the next summer that I properly visited and sort of did a couple of volunteering days on the site. And that was when we only had the one site here. There was only one site. I think there was around 25 staff.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Were you working for SOFEA?
I started in 2019.
Yeah, so that would have been when I think the start of a bit of growth. And Richard mentioned that, you know, I had a conversation with him around what SOFEA does, the commitment to young people. He told me a bit about his backstory of being an ex-head teacher and struggling with seeing young people excluded from traditional education, all of which I found extremely interesting. But also what really attracted to me to SOFEA was the clear passion of the staff and commitment to the young people, and the fact that you guys had a physical space that you could work with young people within. So yeah, that was in the summer of 2019. Richard also mentioned that there was the opportunity to set up a second SOFEA in Milton Keynes, which is just about reachable from my home in North London at the time. So it really resonated with me, the work that SOFEA was doing then and now, because my background's in social services. So I've done multiple roles across local authorities in London, mainly working with young people in care, young people excluded, young people on the periphery or in gangs. So when I saw the setup in Didcot, I just thought it was amazing. I thought, you know, there's a really dedicated, well-informed staff providing opportunities for young people, not just to be part of a programme, but to actually be employed as part of the food redistribution operation, as part of being mentors for other young people. And to be honest, I loved it, and I thought this is a great opportunity. Plus, Richard came out in a Brazilian football shirt and Adidas trainers, and I thought this is the kind of guy I could probably work for. So yeah, I think my unofficial interview was having a conversation with Richard, and then I volunteered to do the community barbecue.
Oh yes.
We had, and I thought I better not poison everyone here. So everyone had probably the most cooked chicken they've ever had in their life. But yeah, so after that, some more discussions. Richard also found out that I could drive a forklift, so I think he thought someone with a social care background who can drive a forklift perfect for us.
Yes, quite the skill set.
Yeah. So that was kind of my initial introduction to SOFEA, and I agreed to a 6-month contract to help set up the new Milton Keynes site. So that was going from about July 2019 to the end of the year. So yeah, from that point we agreed that I would be up in Milton Keynes trying to establish some links to schools, to police, to sort of any facilities that we could get young people of a similar demographic to that you were already working with in Didcot. And the reception from Milton Keynes was really positive. They really felt from a number of the statutory bodies that having a SOFEA in Milton Keynes would be amazing. So at this point, we're still end of 2019. We did the open day with FareShare, our partner, who helped us redistribute food and provide that to us. And we opened in November 2019, the Milton Keynes site.
Quick turnaround.
Which seems like a long time ago now. And yeah, so we started off with 10 charities. I was the only staff member on that site. Very kindly, Didcot staff were coming all the way from Didcot to support in Milton Keynes for the initial setup. And over the next year, obviously, we had COVID about 4 months after we opened that site.
Of course, yeah.
4 or 5 months was the March lockdown. And we'd started some youth programs. We'd done a bit of young people in the warehouse. We were only open 2 days a week at the beginning. That was nice.
I remember.
But very quickly, it became obvious that there was a demand for the work with young people, and that we had a real onus on us to get this into an operation like Didcot had, which was a 5-day operation with an education facility and wellbeing programs. I wouldn't have imagined that it would have happened so quickly over the years. In a strange way, COVID accelerated the development of Milton Keynes. As anyone sort of involved with FareShare or SOFEA will know, we started doing huge quantities of food from both sites. There was also unlimited people on furlough, so we had all these incredibly helpful, diverse group of people come in and help us run the food. So from about March 2020 to that summer, we went from doing around 7 or 8 tons a month to about 90 tons a month of food from Milton Keynes while doing outreach with some of the young people we'd worked with. So very quickly we had an operating second site for SOFEA that was a 5-day food operation. From there, we sort of managed to get quite a lot of funding in over that COVID period and began to set up what looked like a very similar model to what you had here in Didcot. I think the first group we employed was a warehouse team, and that included some of the young people we'd been working with previously in Milton Keynes. And from there, slowly got contracts with the college to have an education program, which is hugely exciting, such a core part of what SOFEA does. And then after that, managed to get contracts for wellbeing and other parts of what SOFEA do. So yeah, I mean, fast forward 4 years later, we've got 23 staff on that site. I think 6 or 7 of whom are young people that have come through programs. Very much the ethos of SOFEA. SOFEA has grown massively, and I think we're an organisation of about 80 staff, 2 sites. That site does 50 tons of food a month. And it's been an absolute journey.
It really has, isn't it? I can't believe it's, we started at a very similar time, and I can't believe it's been 4 years already. And the landscape of where we're at is so different now. And I think you're right, COVID definitely sort of escalated that need and ramped up the development, didn't it?
It did, and I think the other thing that it did is it kind of announced us on the stage in Milton Keynes as a charity, and suddenly everyone started sort of taking notice, going, who's this charity with an unlimited amount of food that's pumping free food into communities that need it in an emergency. Right at the beginning of COVID, I think Richard and a few other CEOs in the network made the decision to keep operating. to keep operating and not to shut down. And I think actually that did us a huge amount of favour in terms of our reputation, is that we stepped up, and that included a lot of the young people that were, I know in Didcot for example, that were either volunteering or younger staff, were key people in providing emergency food boxes over that period. So yeah, over the last 4 years I feel that was a critical point. There's been a few, but that was a critical point. And we came out of it sort of back end of 2020, early 21 with, you know, a skeleton team of the SOFEA model, which was, you know, we hired a head of wellbeing in Archner, we hired a teacher, Nick, in Milton Keynes, and yeah, you could very much see the start of what Didcot had developed over the 4 or 5 years prior to that, which is an amazing team of really genuine invested people who had a skill set that could work with young people who hadn't really found a place anywhere else, and we found in Milton Keynes that there was plenty of young people like that. And also I find it quite interesting that they're two very geographically different areas. You've got Didcot, leafy suburbs of Oxford, but there's been a need for a SOFEA here obviously over the last 10 years, and then in Milton Keynes it does quite well economically on a national level. It's got lots of big companies there, etc. But it's also a very oddly put together place for anyone who's been to Milton Keynes.
Lots of roundabouts.
That's the first thing everyone knows. And then what you don't see from the roundabouts is that off those big dual carriageways are disparate housing estates, some of which are sort of relatively wealthy, and some of which are incredibly impoverished, which also creates this kind of disconnection for the communities that live there. Let's say, you know, you're a single mother, you're not working, you don't have a car. If you live on one of those estates, it leaves you very isolated. We also work with a lot of young people in care, and Milton Keynes, I used to work for placements teams in London, is a hotspot for placing young people when they've been moved out of area. So sometimes for their own safety they'll be moved out of London. Milton Keynes, Northampton, very hot on placing young people there in supported living. So we also found that there was quite a lot of hostels in Milton Keynes that were, you know, had lots of young people who were a bit lost, who'd been out of education, 16 to 18, no family support, and what they needed was a SOFEA.
Yeah,
they
place to go.
They needed a safe space. And we found that right from the beginning in Milton Keynes, that there was these young people that, you know, they'd come, they'd volunteer, they found some self-worth, they found a peer group. And to be honest, you know, I sort of had a 6-month contract where we saw that right at the beginning, and I thought this is something, you know, worth continuing for me personally to keep working for SOFEA, and I loved it. I loved the work, I still do. But yeah, developing that site, seeing what it was doing for young people, being able to hire them as part of the SOFEA model, I would have guessed it would have gone as quick as it has. But yeah, it was very validating, I think, as a charity and personally, to go, there is a need here. What we do works in the leafy suburbs of Oxford, but it also seems to work for these young people who live in a kind of urban area. So I think as a charity, it was very interesting, because it kind of felt the model held across a different location. And also that you could go into an area where we were welcomed by the statutory bodies, be it the schools, be it the college, be it the police, be it health, the youth offending service. They all wanted us there. We wouldn't have been where we are now in Milton Keynes with the contracts and the amount of young people we're working with if we hadn't had an area that genuinely had a need for the kind of provision that we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the last 4 years running that site, and like I said, it was probably the biggest privilege and honour of my life to do it. It was like such a huge opportunity, and it's been taken forward by an amazing team. Now I am still quite sad that I don't get to go. I don't miss the commute, but I miss the team.
Of course, yeah, they're an amazing team.
Yeah, so yeah, I still go to both sites now as part of the new role, but yeah, sort of moving on to where we are now as a charity, we had everyone was very delivery focused, you know, and this is often the case whether you're a business or a charity. At some point you have to invest in yourself to go to the next stage of development, and that often means releasing people from front facing delivering roles. You know, even though I was site director, the kind of fluid nature of the work means you could be on the forklift, you could be dealing with a young person having an episode that day or whatever it may be. And as much as I enjoyed all elements of the work, it makes it difficult to look strategically at what you want to do. So as a senior team, we decided to invest in the organisation and create new roles, including marketing, fundraising, and amalgamate them into a new team, which is the team that I'm heading up now, which is the Business Innovation Directorate. And what that is allowing us to do is to support the departments on both sites in a number of ways, chasing funding being like a critical one, but also with more practical things about, what does your department need? Is it laptops for our laptop redistribution program? Is it contacts within businesses? So yeah, it's been a new stage of SOFEA and a new team, but I've got a fantastic new team that I'm working with, and Paul, who was a life coach on for us in Milton Keynes and at SOFEA and Didcot, has taken over as site director, and it couldn't have a safer pair of hands. So yeah,
amazing. It's a massive change, isn't it? But you say, it sound when you were reflecting earlier about like your experience over there and how much it meant to you. It's clear how invested you were in it, and it's been a mad 4 years, hasn't it? And you've developed it so well. It was interesting just to reflect on what you said about coming off delivery. I find that can be quite challenging when you're so passionate about what you do and then having to put on a different hat.
Yeah, for sure. It has its challenges, but that's why I got into this work in the first place. I enjoyed working with young people. I enjoyed the energy it can bring, especially young people that have various challenges for progressing their own lives. So stepping away from that was difficult. That some of the highlights of the 4 years of running Milton Keynes was, young people that would challenge you, that would, maybe make the day more complicated, but at the end of a scenario, you'd sort of have a better relationship with them. I'll give you one quick example of something, this kind of stuff that I do miss. We had a young man called Dennison in Milton Keynes. And we got on well, but he liked to challenge authority, and obviously I was running the site, so he liked to challenge me specifically as well as the other staff. And he kept putting one of the sofas from the canteen into the classroom. All right, and he knew he wasn't allowed to do that, but it's not the biggest crime in the world. Anyway, so we kept moving it back out. We had a word with Denison, you've got to leave it in there, because then he'd be lounging on the sofa and kind of disrupting the session. Probably sounds familiar, Nick.
It does, yeah.
Anyway, so I went out on a meeting to meet the council, and when I come back, he'd managed to take the sofa. We also provided some bikes and bike locks for all the young people so they could access the site. You might be able to see where this is going. And he de-locked the sofa to the radiator.
Oh my gosh. It's quite creative.
I mean, I was trying to be, authoritative, and I found it really funny for a start.
Yeah.
But I think the way it's interesting. So for a Dennison to do that in a traditional education setting, it's very difficult for a teacher or a head teacher to manage that without just going, Dennison, you're excluded, you're going home, whatever. The approach that me and Nick took was that, we sat down, we had a chat with him, but we also admitted that it was quite funny, but that also it's a fire hazard, and we explained that to him. And it was that kind of SOFEA approach that you're allowed to take in a kind of different alternative settings to working with a young person, that in previous roles, that kind of behaviour where I've worked for councils or social services in the past, it's very hard to take a non-traditional route to deal with a scenario like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But after that, Dennison progressed really well. He went on to get work, and he still comes back and pops in to give everyone a hard time mainly.
Yeah, that's amazing.
but pops in, and that's something that I've found. I mean, I know it happens here in Didcot as well, but the fact that young people come back, how many young people go back to their college or to their secondary school just to check in and see the staff? Very few. I'd wager almost none. Whereas at SOFEA, even though I've been here a shorter time than some of the staff, is within 4 years of Milton Keynes, almost weekly or monthly, you get young people popping back in, and that's always to see the staff and also chat to other young people. We had a young man called Jamal pop back in recently. He pops back to the site in Milton Keynes all the time, speaks to other young people about his experience.
So nice.
So yeah, sort of there are elements that I miss, definitely, but I think for me, we're at another critical point.
Yeah, we are.
At SOFEA, we're no longer the nice small youth project in Oxford with some nice staff that work with some challenging young people with a site that does food in Milton Keynes. we are moving towards being a significant national charity. If we've already worked across 2 geographical locations, we're being asked to do more in Northampton. We're doing consultancy in London. So yeah, I think it was the appropriate thing, but with change always comes a bit of loss, you know?
Definitely, yeah. You've only got so much capacity, haven't you? And I think, you know, to really invest in the Business Innovation Directorate, you know, it does take a lot of work, and like you say, stepping away from some of that delivery. But yeah, no doubt your 4 years had a huge impact, and it sounds like you've got some good stories to go along with it as well.
I got a few. Yeah, but yeah, I mean that is why I'm still here, is that I really believe in the work that we do, and I can see it every day. And I think that's the same with a lot of SOFEA staff. We have a notoriously low turnover of staff. I've worked in jobs where you won't be working with the same people every, month to month, social work, etc. We've got a lot of staff that have come from statutory backgrounds, CAMS workers, social workers, teachers that have ended up at SOFEA. And there's a reason for that, and that's that a lot of us became frustrated with the traditional ways of supporting young people and could see the failings of it. So if we want to keep doing what we do, I guess the part of the work of the Business Innovation Directorate is to ensure we can do more of it.
Yeah.
And there's a few different versions of that. It's about scaling what we're doing in the areas that we're in. I think Didcot originally was a 7,000 square foot site. It's now a 21,000 square foot site with a kitchen and a gym and a laptop redistribution project and an education program for 50 young people and wellbeing services that you run and outreach. So that scale from the original, we do a bit of food and we do a bit of work experience for young people. In Milton Keynes, we've had the same experience. We're now at a point as a charity where that site is creaking at the seams.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember that here. So I think as an organisation, we need to ensure that we're meeting the need in the areas that we are. So the Business Innovation Director have been looking at significant bits of funding to get that Milton Keynes site expanded, and that probably means moving site entirely, which is no mean feat, both financially and practically, to move what is now quite a large operation. So we need to be engaging different types of people. By that I mean SOFEA's historically been funded by statutory bodies and by trusts and foundations. So the original contract with Activate, which is what provides the education contract in Oxford, was one of the biggest contracts historically here, and it's allowed this fantastic education program to grow. It's similar in Milton Keynes with the MK College funding the education program, which they're really invested in. They've recently said that we're becoming the number 1 alternative provision in Milton Keynes.
That's amazing.
For young people, which is fantastic. But there is a pressure to grow.
Of course, yeah.
So, a quick example, there's around 400 or 500 young people that come out of their GCSEs at 16, 17 that don't go into college or further education, and by law they now need to in Milton Keynes. We work with 20.
That really illustrates the need, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a big bit of the business innovation work is how do we get there? How do we get from smaller contracts that don't really cover the cost of the buildings? Warehouses are expensive. The food redistribution program we won with Fair Share is expensive, and SOFEA are financially expected to fund that operation. Fair Share don't fund it for us. So we're looking at other avenues of funding. Something that we really haven't done over the last 10 years is work that closely with business, big corporates. I know that you're running a program funded by John Lewis at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, the transition support program, and that came out of one of the volunteers in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Come in to do some volunteering and connected us with partners at the John Lewis Foundation.
Yeah. And
because of that program, we've been able to employ a young person who was on the education program and effectively, in her own words, changed her life.
Yeah.
She could never imagine that she would be working at a charity, part of a therapeutic team, supporting other young people who are going through what she went through. So yeah, that's like a really good example of how
that's a great
we can get involved with corporates.
And also just such a common theme of young people that didn't feel they were able to achieve these things.
Yeah.
Who then have come through the model of the therapeutic type environments that the teams on both sites create, are allowed to flourish and develop in that way. But yeah, the key part of that is that wouldn't have happened without the funding from a corporate. And I think that's really important that we retain our identity as we start working with more businesses, which is that, the tail can't wag the dog. We know what we do is good, and we would like people to fund it and support us to do more of it. But I think we have to be very careful at the stage we're at about being selective about the funds that we take, and being confident now, 10 years in, that what we do works, and asking people to fund our model of working. In the past, obviously, a lot of charities will experience this. You take contracts because you need them, you need to fund what you're doing. But does it affect who you are as a charity? Are you doing things exactly as you would do them, or are you doing them because the funder's asking you to do it that way? And I think anyone who's worked for a charity will be familiar with that. The really fantastic thing about getting corporates involved is that if they come in and they feel invested and they understand what we do, often they will give you more freedom potentially than some other funders, because they've come in, they've seen it, and they just want to fund the good work that you're doing. So Caroline, who heads up she's our head of partnerships now. Caroline was she's in the business innovation team. She was previously the director of Thames Valley for 2 years.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years.
2 years, yeah. It's a fantastic job here. She's now making all these connections with businesses that are interested in various bits of what we do. So whether it's the employability that is going on in Oxford, or if it's the education programme in Milton Keynes, we are trying to speak to businesses about how they can specifically support us. Okay. And Caroline is managing that bit of work with support, but is doing a fantastic job of that. I think the best version of that is that we have a huge repertoire of businesses offering us skills, mentoring for young people, jobs, funding for programs that we want to do. And we've never had the capacity to manage it properly before. It's been, like you mentioned, the volunteer mark, and that fantastic bit of work that's come through John Lewis was quite, fortunate the way that it came about. We'd like to ensure that more of those opportunities are coming in more regularly, and in a way that's quite strategic and planned, and we know what we're asking from them. So yeah, that's been a big bit of work for the Business Innovation Director, and we're still early days.
Yeah.
It's still early days.
So you say it's about 3.5 months in or something?
3.5 months, and about half the team were sort of finishing off their old jobs for half of that, including me. So yeah, 3.5 months officially. But yeah, so along with Caroline, we've got James, who's our head of fundraising and has been doing a world-class job of raising money for some years now. Was James here similar time to you?
He was, yeah.
So I think James has been working for us about 5-6 years. He has lots of pre-existing relationships with funders who really like what SOFEA do. We're at the moment being asked to go back to those funders who are really interested in our development. It's a great journey to be on with us as a funder. If you started funding us in 2019 and then you come back to fund us in 2023, 24, it's a whole different proposition of what we are and what we can do. So we've got quite a few sort of historical funders that are coming back on board and are offering more funding for what we're doing. And then there's this whole other world that we're exploring, which is philanthropy. So some of the majority of the biggest charities get the large percentage of their funding through philanthropy. I think most of the top 100 are over 50%. So SOFEA at the moment is around about 80-90% trust foundations, corporates, contracts, very small amounts from individuals or groups that give to charity. So we're trying to hold events, we're trying to increase engagement from SOFEA, from people who might have something might click inside them where they think this is something that's close to my heart. Maybe they struggled at school, maybe they have a family member with a disability, maybe they have family affected by drugs or domestic violence, etc., and they see an organisation like SOFEA and they think, well, this is the kind of work that I'd like to support. So that's a totally new approach for us, but it's also going to be critical looking at charities that develop to the size that we are now and where we're going, that we get people really invested in what we're doing, both practically, both on the business side, but also people that want to fund that do have the means to, but fund bits of work that are important to them, but that is also relates to what SOFEA do.
Definitely. I think, like if you look at the people that do invest as well, and like you say, it's such a journey to go on as a funder. If you started funding us in the earlier days and now can see the development, I can imagine that's quite a rewarding process to know that your investment and your time and even your money is going towards people who need it, and the evidence is there. When people come and visit, they can sense the energy on both sites. They can sense how much impact the work has on young people and staff. It's not just the young people we support, but people of all ages on our programs. So it's great that we're kind of starting to explore that area. Yeah,
and I think, what do people want when they're putting money into something? There's a sort of business element where people want a return on their investment. They want to see that things they're giving money for are doing good. If in a sort of altruistic charity world, that's what people want. Our biggest example is, if we moved site in Milton Keynes from a 7,000 square foot site to a similar one that Didcot has here, the one we're sitting in, we're looking at a site that's 23,000 square foot. That 20 figure that I mentioned of young people out of education goes up to 50 or 60 or 70. So if you invest in SOFEA and helping us move to another site, you're investing in doubling programs. You're investing in tripling programs. The food operation that does 50 tonnes a month, if it then goes to do 100 tonnes a month, you're feeding an extra 100 organisations potentially who work with thousands of people. So I think part of the Business Innovation Directorate's work needs to also be on evidencing that. People need to understand that and say, okay, if you come and visit a site, no one has ever come, in my experience, in the last 4 or 5 years, to either Didcot or Milton Keynes and gone, this is a crap idea.
I think I'd second that.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever visited and gone, oh, so you save food that's going to be wasted and you get it to people that need it through a number of organisations plus your own community larders. You work with young people that have nowhere else to go, that are being excluded from anywhere else. You work with employers to get people into work. You provide therapeutic interventions and signposting where it's required. No one has ever said that's a bad idea. But getting people to understand it as a model is challenging. So I think part of, the great things about stuff like this, about, the podcast, the newsletter, stuff that SOFEA is now developing towards to be able to have a communications that actually people can understand, as well as getting people here. There's only so many site visits you can do in a week.
That's true, and also if we are looking at a more national level, actually taking the time to come and visit, I think if we want to kind of, hopefully there'll be more sites and, more visits one day, but you're right.
So I think something we've been looking at doing as well is, I've been speaking to a few bigger national organisations. UK Youth, for example, are a huge lobbying organisation that lobby on rights for young people, specifically those in care, but a number of different demographics. They're visiting Didcot in a couple of weeks because, we've, again, had the capacity to start contacting these organisations saying, we are a growing organisation, we would like to be part of your network. And they're coming down to have a look at what we do. Again, I'll assume they'll think it's good. And then from that point, you're tapping into national organisations. Suddenly, SOFEA isn't just known in Milton Keynes and in Didcot because we're attending, some of these big networking events, some of these national fairs of charities that all, SOFEA has a lot of similar aims to a lot of the bigger organisations out there. I think the way that we go about it is quite unique. The space and the spaces in which we work are quite unique. But a lot of the things that we are advocating for are not. There are lots of organisations that also think that the care system is broken. There's lots of organisations that think traditional education isn't right for every young person. And what we need to be doing is sort of been getting on board with those organisations as allies, as people that kind of agree, why we exist. There's a certain element to charity that you should always be trying to do yourself out of existence, and unfortunately this is a required thing. I mentioned when we went to Milton Keynes, there's an obvious need. If there was no need, we should all pack up and go do something else.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true.
But yeah, with UK Youth visiting and other big organisations, I'm hoping that as we develop and we get better communications and we tap into these more national networks, that SOFEA can expand beyond the areas that we're in now. To be honest, I think the challenge is not expanding, but expanding at the right time. So we've been offered various opportunities outside of the areas that we work in, including additional sites to redistribute food, to take on contracts, provided by the police to do outreach. But we've got to do these things at the right time, and that means having a sort of robust senior team and fundraising and marketing, etc. None of that was as critical when you're small.
No, that's it. Yeah, and now you need the more capacity, and like you say, the people that are dedicated to that strategic thinking and relationship building with businesses and corporates. Yeah,
and it's definitely going to be a very challenging period again. Similarly to when we opened Milton Keynes, and financially it was hard on the charity to suddenly open another site and raise funding for that. But I think SOFEA has always taken risks, managed and considered ones, but that those risks have always been because we felt that there is a need for what we do. So the creation of the Business Innovation Directorate, and we've got another. So I've mentioned Caroline and James. We've also got Lauren and Chris, both younger staff who've been involved in programs in the past. Lauren was work experience with us in Milton Keynes. Now running our content creation, our social media, and pushing out. Really has done a fantastic job on pushing out more of what we do. So I think that is, if I had to put it in a nutshell, it's to try and create the means, the resources, the Business Innovation Directorate, to create the means and the resources to grow what SOFEA do, both into new areas, but also to scale it in the areas that we're in. Because what we do is really good.
Yeah, it is good, and like you say, we do have amazing feedback, and the risks we have taken so far have really paid off.
Yeah.
And they've kind of created really meaningful work, haven't they? So with impact.
And I think it's probably worth mentioning that I've worked for charities in the past, various charities in the past, where sometimes the focus is potentially on maintaining and growing the charity as a whole. And sort of claiming stories out of it is quite a common thing in charity. What I really love about SOFEA and want to retain as we get bigger is that we don't claim to do things to people. We facilitate environments where they can lift themselves up out of whatever situation it is. So, a young person that's, progressed from a program and potentially received some well-being support, etc., they are still the sort of the main person that has the agency to change their lives. And yes, we can create an environment where we can assist in that happening, but it still requires that young person to do it themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think we just have to keep that sort of identity as we keep growing, which is that the core of who we are is the young people that have come up and that now form sort of a third of, I think, the team across both sites. And the best version of working with young people is having young people deliver services who've gone on that journey and have lived experience themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're so right. And, it is that like empowering people to make the change, isn't it? And if we can create a safe and nurturing space where where they can access that, I think that's so important. Some of the conversations I think we've had as a head of department team is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
I feel SOFEA really does kind of provide or, offer those kind of first three pillars, the nurture, the safety, the food, the shelter, all those things, the love. So many of our young people don't know what love is or haven't experienced love. And they can come into a community that they love and that they know they're cared for. I think, those three things will help young people empower and make change.
And I think we've had, I think that's something that we've missed without having the proper marketing or comms functions, etc., which was fine because the focus was always on the work. But now, as I said, to grow, we need to be capturing some of this. Is the feedback from younger staff and young people about why did nothing else work and SOFEA did? That's for them, I think that's a key question that we need to capture and start putting out there. And if young people are comfortable to share those stories, then even better. But a few comments from a staff member now in Milton Keynes is that she said she finally felt valued and wanted because someone from SOFEA would always knock on my door if she didn't turn up. She was on an employability program. She felt valued. She felt, finally someone really cared about her, and that was the staff team there. So I think it does go beyond kind of a traditional relationship. Well, at least from my experience of working sort of 10, 12 years in social care and there is definitely we go the step further at SOFEA, and that does really pay off. It's not without its complications.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, if you have a foundation like that and an ethos like that, and something that you've managed to replicate across 2 areas, and you've now created a facility that's hopefully going to allow you to grow, then it's exciting times.
Yeah, it is exciting times. And like you say, we're hopefully moving into another huge era of development. And I think now that we've got this amazing Business Innovation Directorate to kind of, I guess, leapfrog onto the next kind of era of SOFEA, it sounds like really exciting. And I know a lot of, for example, like John Lewis Foundation, their ethos really does mirror ours. And I think, for us to find more partners or individuals that share those core values of what we want our communities to look like, I think it's so important, and hopefully it'll be a successful mission.
I've always had this kind of underlying faith, even when times were tight as a charity with money as often they can get, is that the model and the ethos of SOFEA is so strong, it will carry us through if we manage it correctly and we manage to communicate it correctly. And that includes, like you say, with partnerships like John Lewis and others. But I think if we can communicate it, then it will allow businesses, it will allow individuals to latch on to some of those core values and go, you know what, I really agree with this, and I really feel passionately about this area that SOFEA are working in, to then support us to help us get to that next level. So what does that look like?
Yeah. Who knows? Well, it's the power of, finding connection, isn't it? It's human connection. Even in business, there's individuals working in businesses who might resonate with something. Yeah,
I think sort of to round it off, but the best version of this in 3 years and 5 years time is that we have met the need in the areas that we're in, and that we are communicating the model of what we do extremely well, and we've engaged a number of stakeholders, whether it's statutory, which we already have a lot of support within, individuals that want to support us as a charity, businesses that match their values to ours and support us, and we're looking at what other areas, which area really needs a SOFEA, and we go in on request, maybe to do specific bits of work using the expertise that we have. We have really deep expertise within the charity now across an amazing array of areas, and that we are sort of, people in areas are requesting our presence as a charity. I'm from East London, and we could have really done with a SOFEA when I was 14.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that. It's it is a real.
It's a common thing to hear.
It is a common thing to hear. Yeah. Which it shows how meaningful it can be and is. Yeah.
But I think the meetings we've had with all the teams, and how the feeling around the Business Innovation Directorate is that we're going in the right direction. We've had some really good things come off in the first 3 months around finding funding for departments that needed it, and trying to get some of those stories that we've been talking about out. So I think if we do that successfully, it's onwards and upwards.
So for any kind of existing or even new partners, or people who are just generally interested in what we do at SOFEA and want to get involved, what would you say?
I'd say initially, if you were an individual, and some of the things that we've been discussing around sort of getting more involved in programs and looking at things you could support, then come directly through to the Business Innovation Director that's initially contacting me, and we'll find the appropriate person. So that would be Noel, Noel, @sofea.uk.com, for any inquiries about anything that we've discussed. And separately to that, if you just want more information about the charity, or maybe you're an individual that needs support, maybe a young person that in the areas that we work in, it's info@sofea.uk.com to find out something more general. But I think we're in a position now where we can manage relationships properly. We can get people onto site, get businesses onto site, organise volunteering days, really get people integrated with what we do before they decide if they want to support us or not. I really encourage people to get in touch.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's
Thanks,
been
Nikki.
Really good to have a really in-depth chat about the Business Innovation Directorate.
Thanks for putting up with my monotone voice.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's been a great chat. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noel, for coming on to the SOFEA Sessions podcast. As always, if you are interested in what we do at SOFEA, if you want to support us, please do get in touch. You can get in touch on our website, social media, or you can post your comments and feedback on Podbean or whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. Before you go, a little sneak peek into episode 11. Caitlin Cox has come on to the podcast to talk about her experiences at school, some of the adversity she faced as a child, and how all of that has led her to being a staff member at SOFEA, supporting other young people who face the same challenges that she did. Keep an eye out on our social media channels for the release of episode 11 with Caitlin, and as always, thank you for listening, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe.